You didn't check nothing. You entered a check, like disrespecting our kid. Yeah. I don't know how much disrespect I'm gonna keep taking from from his father. Be honest, bro. Real sh**. I asked DDG and G Herbo for advice, cause that about to lose his life. Keep playing.
The internet thought it had already seen every possible scandal tied to Chrisean rock. The fights, the viral meltdowns, the chaotic live streams, the non-stop drama surrounding her relationship with Blueface. Fans believed nothing could shock them anymore. But what allegedly happened behind the closed doors of Zeus Network may be the one story that changes everything. Because according to insiders, a secret meeting took place that the public was never supposed to hear about. No cameras, no press, no leaks, just executives sitting in silence while the CEO himself, Lemuel Plummer, walked into the room holding a thick white folder, and everyone in that room instantly knew what it contained. The DNA test, not the one circulating online, not the one fans had already argued about for months, but the test insiders claim was obtained privately, quietly, and completely outside of Chrisean's control. Sources say Plummer didn't sit down when he entered the room. Instead, he stood there staring at the executives like he was deciding whether to detonate a bomb. Then he slowly placed the folder on the table, tapped it twice, and said the words that reportedly froze the entire boardroom. These are the real results. For a moment, nobody spoke, because if what he was holding was true, it meant the entire story the public had been told could collapse in seconds. According to a staff member, who later leaked fragments of the meeting to a gossip blog, the first page alone had people covering their mouths in disbelief. One executive reportedly whispered, "There's no way she pulled this off." Another allegedly stood up and walked straight out of the room without saying a word. And the most shocking part? There weren't just one set of results inside that folder. There were two. One was the DNA report that had already been submitted earlier, the one people believed proved everything. The other came from a completely different laboratory, one that required strict identity verification and independent testing. The problem? The numbers didn't match, not slightly, completely. Dates were inconsistent. Signatures didn't line up. The chain of custody looked suspicious. And according to insiders, the second report contained a warning that immediately triggered panic inside the network. Patient identity could not be verified. 4 words that changed the entire situation overnight, because if the identity tied to the original test couldn't be confirmed, then someone may have submitted a DNA sample that wasn't even hers. Suddenly, the question wasn't just who the father was. The question became something much bigger. Who actually took the test? Insiders claim that's the moment Lemuel Plummer slammed his hand on the table and said a sentence nobody in that room will ever forget. "She fooled all of us. Not just the executives. Not just the cast. But the entire internet. And if the rest of the documents inside that folder are real, then the truth behind Chrisean Rock's DNA test could trigger one of the most shocking celebrity scandals the industry has seen in years. Because, according to the insiders who witnessed that meeting, the next page in that folder didn't just question the test, it exposed how the entire story may have been manipulated from the very beginning. And once those details start leaking, the internet might never look at this situation the same way again. The moment the words "real results" echoed across the conference table, the room inside Zeus Network headquarters reportedly froze like time itself had stalled. No one reached for their phones. No one whispered. Every executive in that room was staring directly at the folder sitting in front of Lemuel Plummer like it was radioactive, because they already understood the stakes. If the documents inside were authentic, it meant months of viral interviews, live stream arguments, and emotional public claims from Chrisean Rock could unravel in seconds. But according to insiders who later leaked pieces of the meeting, the CEO didn't open the folder right away. Instead, he walked slowly around the table, looking each executive in the eye, like he was measuring whether they were ready for the chaos. That was about to explode. Then he finally flipped the folder open. The first page wasn't the result everyone expected. It wasn't a percentage dot. It wasn't a conclusion. It was a warning issued by the lab itself. Patient identity verification incomplete. One producer allegedly muttered under their breath, "Oh no." Another executive leaned forward and whispered, "What does that even mean?" Plummer reportedly tapped the page and said quietly, "It means the test that was submitted earlier may not have been verified under proper identity protocols." That sentence instantly ignited panic. Because the entire narrative surrounding Chrisean's pregnancy had already been built around that earlier DNA test. Fans believed it settled everything. Influencers had debated it. Blogs had reported on it like it was fact. But if the lab itself couldn't confirm the identity tied to that sample, then the entire foundation of the story was suddenly unstable. And things got worse. The second page inside the folder contained an email chain between Zeus production staff and the testing facility. The message from the 8th lab was blunt. They had attempted to contact the patient, listed on the DNA submission form to verify identity, documentation, but the phone number connected to the file had been disconnected. At that point, several executives reportedly started speaking at once. Who submitted this test? Did she go in person? Was this done privately? That's when Plummer dropped the first bombshell of the meeting. According to insiders, he revealed that the lab security footage showed someone else submitting the DNA sample entirely, not Chrisean. A woman wearing a hoodie and mask had approached the front desk, handed over paperwork, and left within minutes. The room erupted. One producer reportedly slammed their pen on the table. "You're telling me someone else took her DNA test for her?" But the CEO wasn't finished yet, because the next piece of evidence inside the folder made the situation even stranger. The lab's submission form contained a patient name matching Chrisean's, but the identification number attached to the file belonged to someone else. Entirelya, completely different patient. Record now, the executives weren't just confused, they were terrified. Because in regulated medical testing, mismatched identity numbers aren't a small mistake. They're a red flag that something serious may have gone wrong during submission. One executive allegedly whispered the word no one wanted to say out loud: fraud. But Plummer shook his head and said something even more chilling we didn't jump to conclusions, he told them. "We ran another test." That revelation instantly silenced the room. Again, because an independent test meant something important. Zeus had decided to verify the entire situation without informing Chrisean beforehand, and they didn't just send it to another random lab. According to insiders, they used a medical verification pathway that required strict documentation, legal ID confirmation, and biometric verification, meaning whoever submitted the sample had to appear in person. No assistants, no third parties, no shortcuts. When the results from that second test arrived 2 weeks later, executives gathered in a private office to review them. The moment the envelope was opened, the first reaction in the room was pure disbelief, because the numbers didn't match the earlier test at all, not even close. The previous report suggested a clear conclusion. The new report told a completely different story. One producer reportedly stared at the page for nearly a full minute before saying, "This can't be right." Another executive asked the question that instantly changed the direction of the investigation. "If this result is correct, whose DNA did we test the first time?" That's when the investigation intensified. Production staff went back through the lab's surveillance footage frame by frame, trying to identify the woman who had delivered the sample weeks earlier. At first, the mask made it impossible, but then someone noticed something subtle. Her voice when the receptionist asked a question about paperwork. The woman spoke briefly, just 2 sentences, but those 2 sentences were enough because a production Assistant recognized the voice immediately. It belonged to someone who had been around Chrisean constantly during filming. Her assistant. Suddenly, the situation exploded into full-blown panic. Executives immediately began reviewing internal messages, call logs, and production schedules to figure out how an assistant could have ended up submitting such a critical test. And that's when they uncovered something even more disturbing. The assistant had received a text message shortly before the submission date from a contact, saved only as R. The message read, "Make sure the paperwork matches. They can't see the real numbers yet." When that screenshot circulated among the executives reviewing the case, several people reportedly demanded the meeting be shut down immediately. Because if someone inside Chrisean's circle had intentionally submitted a different DNA sample, then the situation wasn't just messy, it was deliberate. But the next discovery pushed the entire scandal into another level of chaos. When investigators enhanced the surveillance footage from the lab lobby, they noticed another figure standing in the background. A man he wasn't approaching. The desk, he wasn't speaking. He was simply standing near the entrance watching the interaction. But crew members recognized him instantly. He had appeared behind the scenes during multiple filming days, sometimes advising Chrisean during arguments with producers. Fans had seen him briefly in background clips, but never knew who he was. And according to insiders, his phone number matched the mysterious contact labeled R in the assistant's text messages. Now executives believed they were looking at coordination. The assistant, the unknown advisor, and possibly others. But what truly shook the room during that meeting was the third page inside Plummer's folder. Because while the earlier pages exposed problems with the first DNA test, page 3 contained the independent results Zeus had ordered privately. And according to insiders, the numbers on that report contradicted the original story entirely. One executive allegedly pushed their chair back from the table and said, "If this gets out, the internet will lose its mind." Another simply whispered, "She's not going to survive this." But the CEO reportedly closed the folder before anyone could read further. Then he slid page 3 into a separate envelope and sealed it. The room erupted in confusion. "Why? Are you sealing it?" Someone asked. Plummer allegedly looked around the table and delivered the sentence that turned the meeting into pure chaos. "Because if this page leaks before we're ready, it could destroy everything." At first, no one understood what he meant, but then he turned the envelope around so executives could read the label printed across the front. "Disputed paternity review." The words hung in the air like thunder before a storm. Because if the independent TST inside that envelope was correct, then the man the public believed to be the father might not be the father at all, and the truth behind this story could be even bigger than anyone imagined. But the meeting wasn't over yet, because the next piece of evidence Plummer revealed didn't come from a lab, that came from a phone recording. And according to insiders who heard it that day, the voices captured in that recording were about to drag multiple people into the scandal, including someone inside Chrisean's own inner circle. The moment the audio started playing, one executive reportedly whispered in disbelief, "Oh my God, they planned this." And that's when the real nightmare inside the Zeus boardroom began. The moment the audio recording started playing inside the conference room at Zeus Network headquarters, the atmosphere reportedly changed from confusion to outright panic. Executives who had been arguing moments earlier suddenly went silent. Chairs stopped moving. Papers stopped shuffling. Everyone in the room leaned forward as the small speaker on the table crackled to life. The voice that came through first was calm, almost too calm. A man speaking quietly. "We just need time. If they see the real numbers now, everything falls apart." According to insiders who later described the moment, several people in the room instantly recognized the voice. It was the same mysterious advisor who had been seen standing in the background of the lab surveillance footage, the man, connected to the phone number labeled R in the assistant's messages. But the next voice on the recording is what truly shook the room because it sounded exactly like Chrisean Rock. Her tone wasn't calm, it was frantic. What if Zeus runs another test? The voice asked that. The man responded immediately. They won't. Not if we control the story. Producer reportedly covered their mouth as the recording continued, because what followed sounded less like a private conversation and more like a strategy session. The man on the call allegedly explained, step by step, how the DNA paperwork needed to be handled. The assistant would deliver the documents. The lab would process the submission without asking too many questions. And most importantly, the results would reach the network before anyone had time to question them. The plan sounded simple, but then the final sentence in the recording changed everything. We just need to stall until the baby's here, the man said. After that, nobody will question anything. The speaker clicked off. For a moment, nobody inside the room said a word. Then the arguments exploded. One executive reportedly jumped out of their chair. This is a setup. Another slammed their hand against the table. We've been manipulated this entire time. But according to insiders, Lemuel Plummer raised his hand and told everyone to calm down, because the recording wasn't the only evidence they had uncovered. The investigation had already gone further, much further. He flipped to another document inside the folder, a series of text messages recovered from a production phone that had been temporarily used by Chrisean's assistant during filming. The messages were short, but they were explosive. One text from the mysterious contact read, "Make sure the sample is labeled exactly the same." Another said they can't verify it if the paperwork matches. The final message, sent just hours before the lab submission, read, "Once the test clears, the narrative is locked." The room erupted again. One producer reportedly shouted, "This is insane." Another executive leaned back in their chair and whispered, "She really thought this would work forever." But that's when Plummer revealed something nobody in the room had expected. The assistant who delivered the DNA sample had already been questioned privately, and according to insiders, the conversation didn't go the way anyone expected at first. The assistant denied everything. She claimed she was simply helping with paperwork. She said she didn't know anything about DNA tests or lab submissions. But when investigators showed her the surveillance footage from the lab along with the text messages recovered from the production phone, her story reportedly collapsed. And what she said next stunned everyone involved. According to leaked notes from the interview, the assistant admitted she had been instructed to submit the DNA sample by someone she described as a family advisor. Not Chrisean. Not the network. Someone from her inner circle. The room went quiet again, because that explanation raised a terrifying possibility. What if Chrisean wasn't the one orchestrating the deception? What if someone else had been controlling the situation from behind the scenes the entire time? That theory seemed almost unbelievable at first, until investigators uncovered one more piece of evidence. Security footage from the hallway outside the lab building. The clip was only a few seconds long, but it showed something that instantly caught the attention of Zeus's executives. After the assistant delivered the DNA sample, she stepped outside the building and spoke briefly with the same mysterious advisor who had been seen waiting in the lobby earlier, but he wasn't alone. Standing next to him was another figure, a woman whose face was partially visible in the footage. And when investigators compared the video frame to public photos circulating online, the resemblance was impossible to ignore. The woman looked strikingly similar to Chrisean's own mother. The moment that discovery was presented during the meeting, insiders say the room erupted into absolute chaos. One executive reportedly shouted, "No way her family is involved in this." Another said, that changes everything. Because if the people advising Chrisean were also coordinating the DNA submission, then the situation wasn't just about a fake test. Anymore, it was about influence, pressure, and possibly manipulation. But the biggest twist was still waiting inside the sealed envelope sitting in the center of the table. The envelope containing the independent DNA results Zeus had obtained without informing anyone outside the executive team for several minutes during the meeting. Nobody wanted to be the one to open it. According to insiders, the silence became unbearable. Finally, Plummer broke it. He slowly unsealed the envelope and slid the report across the table. One executive picked it up. Another leaned over their shoulder, and within seconds, the reactions started. Gasps, whispers, chairs scraping loudly against the floor. Because the independent test didn't just contradict the earlier report, did flip the entire story upside down. The paternal markers in the sample showed a partial match with the man publicly connected to the situation, but the percentage was nowhere near the certainty claimed in the original test, which meant one thing: the first DNA report that circulated online had been misleading, possibly completely false. But the real shock came from a note written at the bottom of the page by the laboratory itself, a note that read, "Additional maternal identity verification recommended." At first, several executives thought it was a routine comment, but the lab technician, who had processed the sample later, explained what it meant. The maternal DNA markers attached to the test were incomplete. Not missing entirely, but incomplete enough that the lab couldn't fully confirm the identity tied to the sample. One producer reportedly whispered the same question. Everyone in the room was thinking, how is that even possible? Because the implication was terrifying. If the paternal result was uncertain and the maternal verification was incomplete, then something about the entire testing process was deeply flawed. Or intentionally manipulated. The meeting ended in complete disarray. Executives argued about whether the network should expose the results publicly or bury them entirely to avoid legal fallout. Some believed revealing the truth would destroy Chrisean's career overnight. Others warned that hiding the results could damage the network's reputation if the information leaked later. But in the end, one decision was made: the full DNA report would remain sealed for the time being, at least until lawyers reviewed every detail. Unfortunately for Zeus, the internet had other plans, because sometime later that evening, a blurry photo taken inside the boardroom began circulating online. The image showed the envelope containing the DNA results sitting on the conference table, and written across the label were the words that instantly ignited a social media explosion: disputed paternity review. Within hours, fans began debating the meaning of those 4 words. Some accused the network of trying to frame Chrisean Rock. Others believed the photo confirmed that something about the DNA story had been hidden all along. TikTok creators started analyzing every hospital clip, every live stream, every interview. Twitter threads comparing timelines gained millions of views overnight. And the more people investigated, the more questions appeared. Why was someone else submitting the DNA test? Who was the mysterious advisor controlling the messages? Why did the lab recommend additional maternal verification? And most importantly, what exactly was written on the pages inside that envelope that Zeus executives were so desperate to keep sealed? Because according to insiders who were present during that meeting, the most explosive detail in the entire report hasn't leaked yet. Page 3, the page that contains the full DNA percentages and the final identity breakdown. The page that could either confirm the entire scandal or completely destroy it. And if that page ever reaches the internet, the fallout surrounding Chrisean Rock might make every previous celebrity scandal look small in comparison. Before this story explodes even further, we want to hear your thoughts. Do you think the truth about Chrisean Rock's DNA drama will finally come out? Or do you believe there's still much more being hidden behind the scenes? And if those sealed results ever leak, how do you think it will affect everyone connected to the situation, including Blueface and the executives at Zeus Network? Drop your opinion in the comments below, because this conversation is only getting started. And if you want more shocking celebrity stories, hidden details, and internet-breaking drama, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next update. Trust us, the next reveal in this situation might be the one that changes everything.